Good afternoon. I want to talk to you over the next few weeks about resurrections, not just one. There are many. Matter of fact, there are 14 in the Bible. So we're going to take a look at each one. What I found in my studies is that they form patterns and they fit into nice little groups. They form a pattern all the way to Jesus, and then the pattern flips over and goes backwards from him on. It's amazing stuff. So let's go ahead and jump in. Our very first resurrection is in 1 Kings 17. It's good to note that here in 1 Kings 17, Elijah is helped by a widow woman. She's very faithful. She shared her food when she didn't have to, but because of that, God fed her and her family for 3.5 years out of one basket of flour, one jug of oil. But now, as we look at verse 17, something bad has happened. And it came to pass after these things that the son of the woman, the mistress of the house, fell sick, and his sickness was so sore that there was no breath left in him. And she said unto Elijah, What have I to do with thee, O man of God? Art thou come unto me to call my sin in remembrance and to slay my son? And he said unto her, Give me thy son. And he took him out of her bosom and carried him up into the loft where he abode, and laid him on his own bed. And he cried unto the Lord and said, O Lord my God, hast thou also brought evil upon the widow with whom I sojourn by slaying her son? And he stretched himself upon the child 3 times and cried unto the Lord and said, O Lord my God, I pray thee, let this child's soul come unto him again, And the Lord heard the voice of Elijah, and the soul of the child came into him again, and he revived. And Elisha took the child and brought him down out of the chamber of the house and delivered him unto his mother. And Elijah said, See, thy son liveth. Very first resurrection in the Bible. We have a couple of guys who left the earth before this, but they weren't resurrected. They weren't dead. So this is the first time. Do we have a whiteboard? Okay. So God has worked a miracle. Nobody dead has ever lived again until this moment. We want to remember who it was who was resurrected. It was the son of the widower. As far as we know, that was her only son. Doesn't talk about any more children. I'll get closer. I'm getting hand motions from the crowd. Like, take a drink of water? Okay. Right here.
Don't tell Courtney I got that out of the room.
Okay. Mom's the word. Thank you, gentlemen. That's good. Okay, these resurrections come in sets of three. We have the Old Testament, and we have Jesus' ministry. Then we have the church. Then we have judgment, which is what we're waiting on now, waiting on the rapture, which is a judgment resurrection. And of course, Jesus is right in the middle. He's the seventh from the beginning, he's the seventh from the end, right in the center. Okay, now let's move on and look at the next one. The next one happens in 2 Kings 4. What did Elisha have that made him different than Elijah? Anybody know? double portion. Everything Elijah did, he did 2 of. So we're going to start here. There was a woman who saw Elisha. They built a room under their house for her. So he was at home there. He was welcome. Let's look at verses 31 to 35. The same thing happened. Second Kings 4, I'm in verse 31. And Gehazi passed on before them and laid the staff upon the face of the child, but there was neither voice nor hearing. Wherefore he went again to meet him and told him, saying, the child is not awakened. And when Elisha was come into the house, behold, the child was dead and laid upon his bed. And he went in therefore and shut the door upon them twain and prayed to the Lord. And he went up and lay upon the child, put his mouth upon his mouth, and eyes upon his eyes, and his hands upon his hands. And he stretched himself upon the child, and the flesh of the child waxed warm. Then he returned and walked into the house to and fro, and went up and stretched himself upon the child, and the child sneezed 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. Okay, very good. Okay, here we have another lady who's very faithful, taking care of God's man. Her son dies. So we have now this next one creates the pattern that we're going to be looking at. In the meantime, Elisha died. I'm sure all the preacher boys around there were talking about how he came up short. He did a double of everything that Elijah did, except this resurrection. He only did one. It was too late. He was dead. So what are we going to do? Anybody know the story? 2 Kings 13. By the time this happens, Elisha's been dead and he's in the grave. Okay. I'm in verse 20. 2 Kings 13, verse 20. And Elisha died, and they buried him. And the bands of the Moabites invaded the land at the beginning of the year. It kind of looks like he lost out on one. And it came to pass, as they were burying a man, that behold, they spied a band of men, and they cast the man into the sepulchre of Elisha And when the man was let down and touched the bones of Elisha, he revived and stood upon his feet. So God can even use a dead man to get his work done. This is what we'll see over and over again. These all the Old Testament resurrections were on account of Elijah and Elisha, and they always follow this pattern: son, son, or child, child, not buried yet, and then a dead man from the grave. And that looks kind of weird, doesn't it? Well, the next three belong to Christ. Look in Luke 7:11-16. Looking at Luke 7:11-16, which I should probably turn there myself. Luke 7, verse 11. And it came to pass the day after that he went into a city called Nain, and many of his disciples went with him, and much people. Now, when he came nigh to the gate of the city, behold, there was a dead man carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow, and much people of the city was with her. And when the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her, and said unto her, Weep not. And he came and touched the bier, and they that bare him stood still. And he said, Young man, I say unto thee, arise. And he that was dead sat straight up and began to speak, and he delivered him to his mother. And it came to pass, fear fell on all, and they glorified God, saying that a great prophet is risen up among us, that God has visited his people. So we see same thing. He's not buried yet, but he's on his way. And it for sure says this is the only son. So Jesus stopped the funeral, just dead in its tracks, stopped it, sent everybody home happy. Doesn't happen very often. The next one is the daughter of Jairus. We find that in Mark. I'm in Mark 5. Verses 22 to 24. And behold, there cometh one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name. And when he saw him, he fell at his feet and besought him greatly, saying, My little daughter lieth at the point of death. I pray thee, come and lay hands on her, that she may be healed, and she shall live. And Jesus went with him, and much people followed him and thronged him. Well, in the meantime, here, the woman with the issue of blood stopped him, which I'm sure that Jairus was not happy with that. But go down to verse 35. While he yet spake, there came from the ruler of the synagogue's house certain which said, Thy daughter is dead. Why troublest thou the master any further? And that's kind of the way we'd look at it, isn't it? Might as well just go on home, not worry about it. It's too late. As soon as Jesus heard the word that was spoken, he saith unto the ruler of the synagogue, Be not afraid, only believe. They came in the house, there were a lot of people there, and in verse 39, when he was come in, he saith unto them, Why make ye this ado and weep? The damsel is not dead, but sleepeth. And they laughed at him. Not good to laugh at Jesus. Verse 41, and he took the damsel by the hand and said unto her, Talitha cumi, which is, being interpreted, Damsel, I say unto thee, arise. And straightway the damsel arose and walked, for she was of the age of 12 years, and they were astonished with great astonishment. So we see how it's linking up. Who's next? If we follow this pattern of only son, only daughter, we need a dead man from the grave. Any idea who that might be? That is correct. John 11. As a matter of fact, Jesus tarried, he waited to make sure that Lazarus would be dead and buried. They have strict rules about funerals. They want them done within a 24-hour time period. I'm starting in verse 20, John 11. Then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him, but Mary sat still in the house. Then said Martha unto Jesus, If thou had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, whatsoever you will ask of God, God will give it thee. Jesus saith unto her, Thy brother shall rise again. And Martha said, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said unto her, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Believe thou this? And she said, Yes. He goes on to ask where they laid him. This really upset Christ. He wept. So he asked to see where he was buried. It was a cave, and a stone lay upon it. I like the fact that the Bible doesn't pull any punches, tells us exactly the way things are in verse 39. Jesus said, Take away the stone, which the family said, That's not a good idea, because it's been 3 days already. So it's not a good idea. Martha, the sister of him that was dead, saith unto him, Lord, by this time he stinketh, for he had been dead 4 days. And they took away the stone, verse 41. Verse 43. When he thus had spoken, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And he that was dead came forth, bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was bound about with a napkin. And Jesus said unto them, Loose him and let him go. I think we'll end there. Those are the first 6. Next time we'll talk about Jesus' resurrection. And then we'll look at the other. There are actually 13 godly resurrections and one that the great white throne, which we all know about. So anyway, I'll stop there. Yes.
Make sure and tell them why he called Lazarus by name.
Oh, yes. Anybody know that? Why he called him by name? That's right. If he just said rise up, the entire cemetery would have got up and came out. Yeah.
Brother Charles had an interesting thought on this too. He said one time he thinks that when he calls us, he thinks that he's going to call us by name.
Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting.
In our own language,
Yeah,
we will understand.
Mike rise up. You know, oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah. I believe that's true. So anyway, resurrection, there's a lot to it. I don't know exactly why, but I have a theory as to why they come in sets of three. We live our lives in a 24-hour day. 1/3 of that day, we are dead, asleep. The other 2/3 of that day, we're not buried. But if you're not saved, you're not alive either. So it's a picture of our daily life. So 2/3 of the day belongs to God, and the rest we're buried. Okay, that's all I got. Thank you.